Hey guys, welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for making some time for us in the middle of your very busy week. I am super excited for today's session because we are covering probably one of the hottest topics that we have in HR and talent right now, which is the state of candidate fraud. I have no doubt you have already downloaded and read through the entire report that we published last week. But just in case you didn't, I want to start with a little bit of a story. So if we go to our first slide here, a company hired a remote software engineer and they went through 4 video interviews. He passed a background check and they actually verified his references. And honestly, in 2026, that's plenty of rigor. That's about all that you really can go for, right? But, what people didn't realize after all of that is that this person was a North Korean operative. And yeah, I think the instinct when you hear that is to say, okay, well, what did they miss? What should they have been looking at and what should they have been looking for? And I'm going to push on that a little bit because I probably would have hired this person. You probably would have hired this person. And that because that followed a pretty normal process for how we interview and assess and ultimately hire, right? That's a pretty well-run machine. But here's the part that I keep coming back to. The company that this is real. The company that actually published this story is KnowBe4. And if you don't know them, their entire business is security awareness training. Like literally teaching people how to spot deception that is literally the product that they sell. And they published this whole case study themselves. They weren't just like, that was bad, we should sweep that under the rug. No, they actually wrote it up so that the rest of us could learn from it, which I think took a lot of guts. And so when I say to you that the hiring funnel has become an attack surface, this is what I mean. This is where a working process is getting beaten, even for the best of us. So if we move to the next slide here, here's what we're going to do for the next hour. We're going to walk you through some of what we found in our research, our fast findings, the top level stuff. Then we're going to hear what is actually going on from somebody who's dealing with it on the front line every day. And then I want us to get to a single decision that I think really determines if any of this is going to work for you. And I'll say this up front, that if you came to get a whole map of all the vendors in the space, we did look at quite a bit, but we're not here to compare one solution to the other. There are a lot of different ways to skin this cat. Instead, what we're going to do is go somewhere else with this. And I think you're going to be glad that we did. So with me today, I have 2 very good friends and colleagues. First, we have Jake Paul, who is our head of product, who ran point on this research. Hi, Jake. What's up?
What up?
Thanks for coming today. You ready to lay some knowledge on these people? Ready to get learnt and turned?
I'm gonna try.
Okay, great. And then we also have Stacy Zapar, who you all may know from Tenfold. She's been in the biz doing recruiting excellent work for a long time. She is recently embarking on a new venture with the Fraud Squad, and she has done literally there's no way to hold a candle to it. More primary research on this topic than anybody in our entire industry. Hi, Stacy.
Hi. Thanks for
Welcome. Yeah, thanks for coming, and thanks for coming right out of a 90-minute presentation as well. I appreciate you being here.
I'm calling from a WeWork conference room, so it's a little echoey. Thanks for bearing with me.
Yeah, I literally have done one of these from a train station before, so it's been worse. And you look great. Okay, team, so everybody who's on, you know the rules. The chat is open the entire time. We will be trying to keep an eye on that and keep engaged. I love to have a little bit of chitter chatter. This is a really complicated topic, so please jump in and throw any questions you have, because we do have some time for Q&A at the end. All right, let's move into our next slide here, and I'll just share with you a little bit about how we did all the work. Real quick, just where this came from, and then I'll move on. So we mapped over 60 vendors we looked at. Some of them we had deep dive briefings and product demos with. But we looked at solutions across all stages of the hiring lifecycle. We also did practitioner interviews with people who are running a two-person TA team and people who are running TA at one of the largest tech companies in the entire world. And then we also did a review of documented incidents and government enforcement records on top of all that. So primary research in its best form. And Jake spent months on this. I have to give you kudos for doing great work on your first report. I'm really proud of you. Okay,
Thanks.
so first up on the top findings from the report, Jake and I are going to take a crack at a couple of these. Jake, I'll start, and then I'll hand it over to you for the rest. Sound good?
Cool. Sounds good.
All right, let's jump in. All right, so the first one here is on, okay, this is what we're looking at. So this is kind of the frame for literally everything that we're going to talk about today. We mapped fraud across 9 stages, and application intake all the way to post-hire. And what got really obvious really fast is that this is genuinely a different problem. It exists at every single stage, which we really haven't seen anything so pervasive before. So at intake, fraud looks like volume. It might look like resumes that are just too perfect, backgrounds that might sound too perfect as well. And at a glance, it's easy to catch, or it's easy to miss a lot of these things because you're getting thousands of applications generated at scale, and your team is drowning in a pile that they just can't sort through, right? At the interview stage, a lot has changed here since we've all gone to remote hiring and we do remote interviewing, right? So fraud looks like a face. It might be a real-time deepfake on a Zoom call, and your recruiter has about 30 minutes to figure it out while also getting through their interview guide. And then post-hire, fraud looks like an employee. Somebody who's already inside, already badged, already has a laptop, has access to your systems. It's the same problem, 3 completely different jobs. And I want you to hang on this slide because we're going to come back to it in a few minutes. If you go to the next one, this is where we have a lot of the evidence of what's going on. So let me give you some numbers here. Gartner is projecting 1 in 4 candidate profiles globally would be fake by 2028. I think that is going to be a conservative estimate by next year. Our friends at Crosscheck found fraud indicators in over 10% of applicants just in 2025. And our friends at Pindrop have tracked that they are finding signs of fraud in like roughly 1 in 6 applicants on its own roles. If you don't know Pindrop, they're also a security company, an InfoSec company. So they are seeing a lot of this in their own pipeline. Ashby is an ATS. They are tracking about 1 in 10 applicants carrying multiple fraud signals. And then Tofu is tracking 20 to 30% of applicants for certain remote engineering roles could be fraudulent as well. So this noise is all over the place. And I think that is exactly why I find this so convincing, like 5 different groups coming at this from 5 different angles, and they all landed on the same thing. So this is what's adding up for me. First, the floor is really high. The most conservative number on this slide is 1 in 10. That is 1 in 10 people, 10% of the people who are applying for your jobs. And I think that this is more pervasive problem than by anybody's definition. The second is the direction is up. What we are actually measuring today sits around 10, 12%, but the forward projection is going to 25. So this roughly doubles, and none of the conditions that created this are going away. And that's the honest read on this slide. It's pervasive and it's getting worse. And especially because we're really not changing any of our operations to address it. I got one more slide here, which is like talk about the systems that we have in place and how these might not be mitigating the problem. They might be contributing to it. So here's a finding that I have not been able to stop thinking about since Jake put this together. I want you to picture a recruiter who really, really is good at their gig. And maybe they're obsessively tracking these things and trying to catch fraudulent candidates in their own pipeline. So she is slowing down on the application front, right? She's taking more time to look through the applications. She's maybe cross-referencing the resume to see if it exists anywhere else. They are digging into inconsistencies in the resume or in the interview transcript, escalating anything that feels wrong to her and is right most of the time. So imagine that, right? That's what we think a really diligent recruiter is doing. But guess what happens to her numbers? time to fill, cost per hire, and pipeline conversion are all not in the place that you would expect them to be for a really excellent on top of their game recruiter, right? All of the things that they are that they're slowing down, or all of the work that recruiter's doing, is on a scorecard doesn't look great on the traditional scorecard. Now, put her scorecard next to a recruiter who has just gotten worse at the job, who is slacking, right? Those two scorecards look mechanically identical. And I don't think there's a line on the traditional scorecard that's going to give you any sort of sense about the difference between diligence and decline. So the person on your team who is like doing their best is potentially has the worst looking numbers in a QBR, and that's definitely going to come up in performance when it's looking like something's slipping. So, Jake, I think that all three of these are really good for setting the tone and setting some of the, like the high level. But I would love to hear from you, like what you're seeing in the market. So I'll hand it over to you for the next few.
Cool. Yeah. So one of the big takeaways is this what I called embedded paradox. And so, from a product perspective, if you think about this is a new problem and that new issue that's sort of surfaced that's become a real meaningful concern to the business and to the recruiting teams. And so products have reacted, and their reactions have been recent. But the point is that the existing tool sets that you already have, typically that are candidate facing, their hands kind of been forced to go build out some sort of a signal around fraud, whether it's application review. AI interviewers and interview recording solutions are now trying to track, fake avatars by the candidates, which is also a big thing. And so for the small team that doesn't have, and I'll come back to this probably a few times on this call, the teams that don't have this true system in place for what to do when something is signaled, like an actual program, they think that they're actually, solving the solution. They're checking the box that they have a piece of technology that is actually addressing this issue. But if you don't have that plan behind it, you're not really, it becomes superficial. It's like, okay, well, I have this signal of high likelihood of fraud or medium likelihood, assuming that they're even checking those numbers. They're basically just getting a false sense of security, if that makes sense. And it's especially for the small teams who don't have that direct line of access to a direct, security partner within the company. They're going to get a little budget, or they're going to use some remaining budget to throw at the problem, but that's not really, the entirety of the solution. It's half the battle. Another one is just kind of an interesting take on, or an interesting finding on how all of these product companies converged. Everyone was building in their own bubble for different purposes, for different use cases, and for different stages of the funnel. But at the end of the day, the products that, from my analysis and talking to security pros who know the landscape of what's out there, really boil down to three core principles that, as you evaluate future technology around fraud prevention and detection, you should consider. One is that they're always going to be surfacing signals, but not verdicts. It's virtually impossible, outside of a few edge cases, to truly know that this is truly a fraudulent candidate. And so what you want to see is just simply signals that are showing, hey, this is what's happening. To me, the most important differentiator from all the products that I did via desk research and also actually talked to and did deep dive demos is that the best ones are going to always explain their work. They're going to explain the signal, where it's not just 67% chance of fraud. It's like, as a recruiter, what do I do with that? I need to go deeper to understand how it arrived at that. So whether it's myself trying to understand, okay, is this a IP address coming from North Korea or wherever, but the candidate says that they're in Omaha, that's a pretty strong signal, versus the resume looking like it was made by ChatGPT, and the whole spectrum in between. So the point is I, as a recruiter, especially when I don't have that security team supporting me, need to be able to go as deep as possible with the most explainable data, so I can actually make a conclusion around what do we do with this candidate. And then also, as all things AI, as it's made its way into hiring, human in the loop always has to be there, and that's the first and foremost thing. And there's been some companies that have facilitated the ability to auto reject based on a particular score. I think that's a flag, and I don't think that should be part of anyone's process. It should always be allowing the human to decide, or the recruiter to decide, do we advance or reject? So Beyond that, features, functionality, these are the core principles that you want to see across all of them, or across all the different solutions. And it's just interesting how all of these companies arrived at this same set of principles as they all built in their own silos and bubbles. And one of the more interesting takeaways, especially from talking to these security folks that know the landscape, is that one of the best solutions is a good old-fashioned reference check, right, which a lot of us have discarded. And I shouldn't say old-fashioned. I think the more modern ones, of which there's a handful, where it's automated digital reference checks, and what they're doing is they're tracking IP addresses. And on the surface, it sounds like, well, that's pretty easy to fake. But if you think about the scalability of what these operations are trying to accomplish, they're doing this for the purpose of scale. They're not just trying to necessarily get one person in. They're trying to get several across several different companies. And this is the hardest thing technically to scale, right? If you're tracking the IP address, if all 5 of your reference checks or 3 of your reference checks are all coming from the same IP address, that's one of the most objective signals in the market. And, I think just on reference checks, it's like we stopped doing them because it became more about like, well, everyone's going to have something nice to say. You almost want to frame this differently if this is one of the paths that you decide to go, where it's really about, defending the fraudulent efforts of these folks. And it's really more of a verification layer than a quality validation layer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Moving on, I think this one's for you, Kyle.
Yeah, I'm happy to pick this back up. I think that it's look, part of our jobs as industry analysts, yeah, we are supposed to look at problems and trends and try to understand what's going on with them, like find the better practices. And it was really cool to hear, like, every time Jake had another conversation with somebody, he wanted to add more and more to the report. I remember I had to finally cut you off, but because we had to get this out. But one thing that was like glaringly obvious as we started looking at the solution landscape, that's part of our job too, is to track the vendors, is like this category of capability has really crystallized very quickly. And I think it was just, I mean, this timeline we have here is like what, like 18 months, maybe that, but like mid 2025 was when we started to see people that were bringing dedicated solutions to market around the problem set. At the end of 2025, we saw that accelerating and saw that starting to move faster. And then in 2026, where we are now, there are like a lot of players who are shipping fraud-specific features. We when we published the first AI interviewer category compass, we were seeing that coming up organically in our analysis. Was several of them had solutions, and now it's becoming a standard part of AI screening and interviewing tools. So the market is moving really, really quickly. And what that means for you as a buyer is that you are evaluating genuinely young products. Now, there are solution providers who have been in cybersecurity for a long time, and now they are finding use case in talent acquisition. So maybe their product is the core capabilities of their product are more mature. The use cases are fresher. So the questions that you would normally ask about a mature leader, like who is the leader? What is the benchmark? What does the install base look like? These kinds of things, they don't have clear answers yet. It's something that Jake and I are going to continue to examine and understand, like what is the actual solution space, because it really is fragmented and covers a lot of different pieces. You can see on the next slide here is like the coverage gradient for solutions. Like this is where I'd say we're going to come back to this slide. Wherever there is a problem, there is a solution. If you've been in HR and talent for long enough, you know that if somebody has a single use case, they can get build a product for an AI grade or AI powered enterprise grade solution, right? So, which I think is fun. I think it's great. But like if you look at the entire space of the pipeline where all this exposure is, there is a lot of solutions out there to support. So we're seeing things like application intake and identity verification that is very well served. I think Jake, you had called out that was pretty well saturated. We are seeing real time deep fake detection at the interview process. It's a smaller one. I think it was. Ophir's company, Ezra, had, it was actually listening to the tone and the cadence of somebody speaking in an interview to see if they were reading, if their tone or word choices had changed suddenly as they started to read a script. It's wild stuff. Reference checking is essentially, like Jake had called, a really limited field right now. I think we counted just like a couple that were doing stuff specifically there. And then on the post hire side, I think I actually saw my friend Katie in the chat asking about post hire. We are seeing continuous verification here. So somebody who is already in the organization, that is maybe they sent their laptop away somewhere. We have seen that. Or they have moved and they're using an they're using a VPN to look like they're still where they were. Like, there's a lot of different things you can track. People that even are what is it, co-working, when they have multiple jobs and they haven't disclosed that to you. They're working like 3 different jobs. So all of these things are being tracked across the board, but it's clustering, the solutions are. And it'll be really interesting to see how this plays out. That the shape of this is not what I would expect. Defense is clustering where the fraud is easiest to detect and probably the cheapest to act on. And then they thin out where it's actually the most damaging and where fraud is most successful. And so I do want to be fair to the market, because I think that the shape makes a lot of sense right now. 15 of the 60 plus vendors that we looked at, launched or rebuilt their fraud product in the last 4 quarters, like we said in the last slide. So most of what is on the table today is relatively new. So we have more to figure out. People go to the low hanging fruit first, right? But the gaps are kind of what you would expect. And that brings me to somebody who has been living in those gaps, and who we introduced earlier. So I would love to reintroduce you guys to my friend Stacy. Jake, you can take a seat in the back for a while. It's time for me and my girl. Stacy, I have to acknowledge that we have known each other for a long time. I think I met you nearly 14 years ago. Austin. I was a nobody blogger, pretty scrappy, hustling backlinks. I was like doing blogging for SEO, and you were already a legend, to be honest.
Yeah, that was my first conference I met you at. That was my very first one.
Yeah.
So we were both coming on the scene, I guess.
Sure. You were already the most connected woman on LinkedIn, though.
No, you're not supposed to bring that up. That's so 2012, 2008.
Well, look, Stacy, if you guys don't know, Stacy is still at it, and I would love for her to share. You are spending your time documenting North Korean operatives and building a community called the Fraud Squad, because this got so bad that somebody's had to do this. So one quick thing before we start, everything Stacy's about to walk you through is her own research. So it's not ours. I think we're proud of what we've done, but like literally you have the master here. So I think I tracked some, correct me if I'm wrong, you built a list of about 4,000 fraud signals, 65 documented operatives. That's your work, right? That's insane. So I have 3 things to ask you, and then we'll open it back up to Jake. Sound good? Okay, so the first one is, I feel like everybody is vibe coding all over the place and building products all over the place now, even ourselves. So for the Fraud Squad, tell us a little bit about it, and tell us why community was where you landed, and not a product, maybe not a product yet.
We'll see. No, I really came to the realization that right now, even if they're not sophisticated, a lot of the fraudsters are organized. And they're talking to each other, and they have scripts, and they have spreadsheets, and they're tracking it, and it's highly organized. And TA, we're not organized at all. We're having Slack channel conversations or a LinkedIn post here or there. So we needed a safe place where we could all come together and talk and share notes and collaborate and organize as an industry. We also need a place where we're not going to broadcast every conversation to the bad actors out there. So it's a private, verified community. Every single person is verified to be an active TA. Member. Also, it's somewhat of a taboo subject. It's a little egg on our face sometimes when we have to admit that we've hired or almost hired a fraudster. So having a little bit of a safe place where we can take some of that taboo away and we all can realize that we're sort of in the same boat was part of the reason for Fraud Squad as well. I just figured it was a nice way to bring people together and get everyone talking about this subject in a way that wasn't really able to happen anyplace else. So I'm more about hosting the room and welcoming everyone in and We've got discussion boards, we've got events, we've got weekly training, we've got an angel network where we're helping each other not have to fly all our candidates out all the time. So there's a lot of, it's a network, and it's a community. So I don't know.
I mean, it needs to be, right? This is everyone's problem. We started at the top with the no before case study. They could have just swept that incident under the rug, right?
Absolutely.
And instead so yeah, it's time to the time to share is totally now, right?
That was egg on their face, and they took some heat from a PR perspective, but we need everyone talking about it so that we can get ahead of it. Of course, every time we talk about it, we're giving everyone the playbook on how to be fraudsters as well at the same time. So it's this sort of catch-22.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the actual work. I mean, the intention I think is great, and you have a reputation for really working obsessively on things sometimes, right? It's just like you dig in, and I would love to know what's actually in there, because when you and I were talking the first time, I was blown away. I knew the scope of the research that we had taken on for our report, but ain't nobody holding a candle to, or holding a candle to yours. So what's actually in Fraud Squad?
I'm so flattered. So this is the Might Be Fake page. It's mightbefake.com. It's just part of my tenfold webpage, and that is not primary research. I should be very clear. Every single bit of it is sourced, and if you click on any of it, it takes you back to the original source, whether it's a blog, a tweet, a LinkedIn post, a report from a cybersecurity company, but it all kind of goes back to the person who's the primary reporter of that information. But yeah, I just thought it's not comprehensive by any stretch. There are companies that have 3 million fraud signals. I've got 4,000 on there, but it is Google indexed. We're going to talk about that, I guess, in just a second. I'll finish that thought. But it's more about spotting patterns. I think recruiters need to see videos of North Koreans being interviewed, or see videos of people using deepfake technology, or what some of the emails look like, and what are the GitHubs, and are we seeing patterns in what some of these fraud signals look like, and so that we can become better and able to see it early. The earlier we catch it, the less damage it has time to do on our end. But yeah, by being Google indexed as well, there are a lot of recruiters right now, as you know, on the other side of the coin that are being impersonated. And so I've been tracking every single impersonator and the catfish out there that are impersonating recruiters like me and Glenn Cathy and Jerry Crispin's. We're all being targeted. So if anyone Googles a suspicious email address, it takes them back. But yeah, anything that you click on that's sourced, it'll take you back to fascinating people to follow on Twitter and X that are vigilantes, and they're tracking every movement of the North Korean fraud rings, and it's fascinatingly interesting of how these networks work. So I just thought it'd be good to put it all in one place for the TA community specifically, because there wasn't anything built for that. So go check it out, it's all free. These are my receipts. I'm also building something that called the cheat sheet, which is more about education. If you had to take a final exam on candidate fraud, I'm going to have a Q&A, like an FAQ on why are they doing this? How does it work? What roles? What should I? So this is going to be the educational part, and then the Might Be Fake page is the receipts page, where you can see people's firsthand accounts of their experiences with candidate fraud.
Honestly, so cool, and a lot of work, but such good work. So kudos to you for doing it. Somebody had to, really, genuinely, and I know how passionate you are about the space. You've been doing enablement and training for recruiting practitioners for a long time. Super cool to see you getting your hands into this massive problem set. Here's a place where I really want to go, though, because we are talking a lot about TA and what we can do here, because it's the problem's right in front of us. It's in our pipelines, right? But you've been making the case that people who actually know how to fight this, you talk about vigilantes tracking these North Korean operatives, right? And it's not just North Korea, but tracking these operatives, the people who are best able to fight this sit outside our industry entirely. And you're about to sit down with some of them. I think you said one of them had one of the most.
We'll see. I met with some this week, and we'll see what's going to happen next. But just people that are experts in this space when it comes to North Korean IT workers, or just in general some of these fraud threats that hit our TA pipelines that eventually become insider fraud as employees. So we'll see what's going to happen. But I did get to meet some folks this week and had some really fascinating conversations, and got to ask a lot of the questions that I've been wanting to know more about. But yeah, my view is that right now we're doing our best, and I'm talking about individual contributor recruiters, people on the front lines. We are, I say we because I still recruit, but we have, 4 times the volume of applicants. We have half the team size that we had last year or 2 years ago, and now we're not only dealing with volume, we're dealing with, a big percentage of those people might be fraudulent, fake, embellished. The resumes that did come through might have come through auto-apply bots. They might be, a lot of them all look alike because they all ran it through the resume, through the AI tool that matched it to the job posting. So recruiters are having a hard time, and we've never been trained on authentication. We've been trained on attraction, we've been trained on assessment, but now we have to do attraction, assessment, and authentication all 3 times, every single touch point. And so a lot of recruiters right now are sort of winging it. We're doing our best. We're coming up with our own questions, and bias is creeping in. We're, well-intentioned recruiters are asking very problematic questions of candidates. They're documenting things that are very problematic. So there's a lot of opportunity for recruiter enablement. There's a lot of opportunity for process redesign. I think we need to redo our funnels. I think that we have thrown AI onto some broken pipelines and broken funnels and broken processes, and that's why we're sitting here with some people are seeing 1,000 or 1,500 applications overnight. So I think if we can kind of start at the beginning and then kind of get our skills and our tactics and techniques and strategies together, I think we will have cleaned up this a lot. I guess what I'm saying is, let's not accept this as the status quo. Let's address it from a proactive perspective so that we're not having to clean up the mess once it's in our pipeline. Let's prevent it from getting in. That's sort of my mantra and what I'm kind of working with folks to implement.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fabulous point, especially because as Jake was doing his research with people who are responsible for this problem at a massive scale, technology was not necessarily the solution for them. Training and enablement was what they were finding was having the best outcomes for mitigating this across the organization, which I think was really fascinating, right? I mean, we, especially in TA, we love to buy a solution to a problem, but it's more complicated than that, right? And so, yeah, it could be a bit tough. If I go to the next slide here, I think that we can start to open up to this bigger question around resourcing. And I feel like if we look at the way that TA organizations have evolved or have managed to keep running through the last couple of change cycles, I feel like we have moved further into like full desk recruiters. They have all of the problems all at once. You talk about like attracting, sourcing, verifying, all of this. We've continued to scale our human workers down and our tech up lately. And I would love to hear from you, like how the resourcing that we've been told is the best approach. How has this actually changed the answer to this big problem in front of us?
Yeah, so you're saying, what do teams need to do besides just getting a tool? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I just want to make sure I answer the right thing that we're talking about. But yeah, I think right now, there are a lot of things that teams need to do in order to kind of prepare. Obviously, you need a tool. If you can afford a tool, knock yourself out, get some tools. I think really it's about layered defenses. So kind of, I didn't invent this concept, but if you have multiple layers of Swiss cheese, every time you add a layer, you have fewer chances of the fraudster, or the bad guy, or the bad actor, the bad behavior kind of sneaking through the other end. And so certainly fraud tools are a very important layer of the Swiss cheese. If you can afford more than one, more power to you. But I do think we need to think about our processes. I think we need to think about redesigning our playbook. I think that there's recruiter training needed. We need to talk about strategies, but also things down to the tactical level, deterrence, things that we can do to prevent the fraud from coming in the pipeline in the first place. There are tripwires, which are ways that it'll kind of surface early. The sooner we can identify it and document it and kind of stack our signals so that we are getting more than one signal, and we painted a picture here as something that's defensible that we can document as the reason for moving on, the better we'll be. So I would say, that's right now, I think the awareness is sort of outpacing the operational readiness piece, and so everyone's doing their best and they're hobbling together a solution, but this all landed in our lap. Nobody has budget set
Yeah.
aside for fraud, training or fraud process. A lot of people are spending money on, in-person interviews. All of a sudden, we're flying everyone in order to prevent fraud. Teams are smaller. There's a lot of challenges that are going up against budget for dealing with fraud, and so everyone's starting with a tool. I think right now a lot of people are, and then there's other things that can be done, and we're just going to have to work our way through it. And so
Yeah. Well, we absolutely will. Jake, I'd like to bring you back on because I want you to get your thoughts on this question. I know that when you were out doing your research, you talked to practitioners at different size companies. On one side, you've got a security company that's running, I think, a TA team of 2 people is what we saw. On the other end, we talked to one of the biggest tech companies in the world, security aware, leadership engaged, real budget, headcount for this. And when you started that work, I assumed you were going to come back and tell me that that bigger company had this all handled and that the small one was drowning. So tell everybody what you actually found and answer like this question too. Did the resources that they had access to at one big company versus a small one, did it change the answer to change the outcomes?
Yeah, no. But also what I would say is that everything's moving fast, like everything in this world of AI that we're in, right? The tools are getting better. Again, because this is such a new thing, I think there's 2 core problems. One is that does the recruiting team have a framework for how they manage sort of, when they identify a fraudulent candidate or identify data that suggests one might be fraudulent. That definitely helps. But that's not a resourcing problem. That is a organizational issue that they're tackling from a structural standpoint. How do we, what is our plan of attack here? The other one is just and I think we'll get into this a little bit more deeper, is the involvement of the rest of the organization, specifically security, whether or not they're involved. When they are, things are much better. They're attacking it. The team doesn't know, the TA teams not only have their own mitigation and reaction plans, but they have someone else to go to that can actually be the owner of this problem, to go do the investigation, to look at it and give them their own determined signal of, is this person worth moving forward with? Is this person, I know they're at the hiring stage right now. Should we hire them? Yes or no? So it's not just throwing money at it because the tools are good. They're creating signal, but they're still getting better. And it's not an end all be all solution. And there never will be, to be honest, because this is a constant cat and mouse game that will, as tools come out, the strategies will change by the bad actors. And so it's just going to be this never ending scenario. So one of my takeaways is just like security is a great place to be, whether you're a product builder or just as a job, because this is just changing faster than ever and it's not going anywhere. And it's an interesting problem to tackle.
I want to stick with both of you. I think if we skip slide 18, because I think that kind of lays out what we were seeing at the 2 different companies. But if we go to 19, that's the next question that I have, which both of you mentioned you were at a fraud summit earlier this week. I think it was hosted by CrossCheck. And so I know that this summit, you guys had a lot of different conversations, a room full of people that are dealing with this in real time. And like that, I wish that we were there. Now I can only imagine how cool that conversation was. But what came out of it? And for this part here, like everyone so far is assuming like every detection works. So let's say that it does work. A tool fires, a recruiter's gut says something's off. It gets escalated. That's the moment that the whole system is designed for. What actually happens? The signal fires, and like, then what? What do we do?
I think I can go first, Stacy. There's 2 scenarios here. One is the more common scenario, which is where they don't have that infrastructure, they don't have the relationship with security, and they don't really have a plan for what happens after. And so honestly, in that camp, nothing really happens. A recruiter's sitting there, they've got some signal, they don't know what to do, they don't really have a dedicated resource to go to say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, what should I do? They'll try to remind themselves that, hey, there's something funky with this candidate, let me keep up my eye on them. And that's really hard as we have big pipelines and lots of people to manage and no real system to do so. But my favorite takeaway from the summit though was like I think there was at least 2 hands-on security team, like security executives, but who are, hands-on. And those were they were describing the ideal scenario, where not only did their recruiting team have all the tools, they had the structure, behind their operations, but they were the point of contact that they literally, were told to go, if and when you have a question, come to me. They will go do independent research. It happens, I was asking about where in the process does this happen? Surely not at the application stage, like, hey, this resume looks funny, but more it
Yeah.
happens later in the funnel, right, to actually justify their time and dedication to go doing this.
Yeah, right.
And that was the ideal state that I actually didn't come across within my research. I hadn't identified organizations that had such a sophisticated structure with truly dedicated security research or security resources, whose sole job it is to support the recruiting team and go do these investigations, of which they do hundreds. These are large, major enterprises. Sometimes one of them was a security-focused organization. So seeing that was super cool, and that painted the picture for me, as far as like what is the ideal state in this very suboptimal, less than ideal world that we're dealing with.
I mean, yeah, it's all still just so unknown. And like Stacy, I'd love to hear from you. Like, is part of the solution influenced by who owns it? Because that was, I know for you, Jake, a big part of this research was that seemingly no sole function owns this, and so ownership is shared. But yeah, how's that shaping the solution when there's no clear owner for
Yeah, that
this?
was a big topic of discussion at the Fraud Summit. Jake Donovan said we were identifying all the issues, and then the next day that Jake and I both were not there was when they focused on solutioning. So we missed the good stuff. We hope to get it, but really it was identified that a lack of ownership is clearly a big part of the issue, and that's what I was saying earlier. The fraudsters are organized, and we are not. We're not as an industry. We're not internally. TA is not the expert in this. Cybersecurity is not the expert in recruiting, and so we both need both teams working together. Something that came up, Jake and I took to separate sides of the room. There was a cybersecurity side and then the TA side, and we all had our whiteboards, and we were going to bring it together, and all that. So on my whiteboard, it was interesting. There was a talk about creating sort of a task force, if you will, internally, but because there were so many stakeholders in this that have sort of their own distinct viewpoint, and so there was, obviously TA and security. But there's also employer branding, and they may not want to have as much friction at the top of the funnel because they're driven by, their numbers are driven by how many impressions or how many applications that come through. So different people have different, there's compliance, governance issues, all kinds of fun legal, HR, they all want to have a say, and it makes sense to have a lot of people at the table. But when every single person has their own distinct sort of motivations and things that they're being measured on, it makes it extra complicated.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there's an answer for that. I don't think anyone has probably completely solved it, but when they do, they'll be the best practice that everyone else is looking toward to find that answer. But I do think collaboration is 100% where it has to happen. We need to get cybersecurity and TA talking at least as a bare minimum, because one of the biggest and easiest fraud signals is, as Jake mentioned, is the IP address, and whether it's a reference check or any in the process. And your cybersecurity team can be plugged into that. You can do a lot of cleaning up of all the nonsense in the funnel very quickly, and that's my goal, is like, let's clean up all the noise so that we can find the signal, help that real candidate shine through, and then do what we do best. And right now there's just more noise than signal, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, I feel it, right? Jake, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say one of the takeaways though is like there's no clarity on who owns it, but the bigger problem, or the other problem here, is no one wants to own it. TA doesn't want to own it, and they shouldn't. It's super understandable. But guess what? Security has plenty on their plate as well. And this is a net new thing for, how Stacy mentioned, like, they're not recruiting experts either. And security people in the room on Monday saying, I don't want to have to do this. They've got more other stuff, not that it's more interesting, but like, and so just the evolution, as it becomes more prevalent of a problem, presuming it does, it'll just be apparent that somebody's got to take ownership. Because there has to be a singular dedicated person or team that this is truly boiled down to. And one of the other anecdotes I heard is like from a larger company who does have this happen, I don't want to say regularly, but it's the head of TA who hears about it from the C-suite. I don't think that's fair, but that's the perception. And so it's just jumbled cluster mess of of a hot potato, like Stacy said, and
So much room
it's
to
going to land somewhere.
this up.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, there is work to be done just in TA, and so I want to come to Stacy with this one. You've been living on the other half. Like, I'm sure you have looked at tools as well, but I feel like you're really working to get hands-on enablement and training for people. Um, I'm not seeing a ton of training being adopted. I'm seeing people still just, what do we do? Maybe a lot of chatter across the channels that you're on. Um, why is that? Why aren't companies investing in something? Because that was literally what we were told was making the biggest difference for, again, this tech company that we spoke to was training for people and not just signals. Yeah.
I absolutely think you need a tool, but I also think you need training. If you had internal fraud issues at your company, you wouldn't just throw a tool at it. You would train your employees of what to look for, right? And I feel like this
Mm,
is, you can't have one without the other. But I know companies that have hired proxies. I know companies that have hired North Koreans. They've told me, in confidence that this is a big issue. And then, right now their budgets are so tight. Any kind of training budget that teams have, I think right now a lot of it is focused on AI, which I get. They're being measured on this. Fraud is this new thing that's caught them off guard. They don't have budget for it. As I mentioned, they have budget being spent now, surprise budget being spent on in-person interviewing and flying candidates out all the time. We have skeleton crews that are nowhere near the size of what TA teams were in the past. No one knows, is AI going to take my job as a recruiter? Next year, are the teams going to be smaller? So investing in the people side of it right now is something that people are sort of kind of, I don't know, like that double Dutch. Remember when people are feeling broke? They're waiting when to jump in and when's the right time, and maybe waiting until people have it figured out a little bit. So there's a little bit of pause when it comes to training, and so that's what another reason when I thought Fraud Squad, I was like, this is a way we can kind of drip it out there to everybody, and if you join, it's free. I don't know if I mentioned that, it's 100% free. We can start educating the masses rather than, one team and a very specific niche solution for them. Let's start getting it out there and just reaching as many people as we can, because this problem is urgent and it's immediate, and every single day, in my view, it gets worse. So the technology is getting better. All the people are using, improvised tactics, full of bias in many cases, or deprecated tactics. Oh, we do the three-finger thing. We're fine. I'm like, no, you're not fine anymore. That actually hasn't been working for several months. It may still work for some that are using older technology, but the newest technology, that doesn't work anymore. And so, that false sense of security that Jake referenced a moment ago, I think that's a real risk. So, right, I do think training is important. Obviously, I do training for a living, so thank you for that, Kyle. But,
well,
but yeah, I think it's something that they're right now, if they have any budget, they're putting it on a tool.
yeah, I mean, it just seems like that's been our behavior for so long was by the tool, and because it is almost counterintuitive. This is a technology enabled problem, right? And so ideally, it's a technology enabled solution. But I feel like the behavior of recruiters that are like to look for pattern, like the things that are going to give you the strongest line of defense is the people who are using the solutions, right? I think we'd actually seen an early tool was based on the IP address. The ATS was flagging potential signs of fraud. They were flagging it as potential fraud, and it actually was introducing too much bias into with the hire managers. They were all seeing that as, well, that's fraud. That's fraud. That's fraud. That's fraud. And so that was too much noise too, right? And so, yeah. All right.
Fraud is accusing innocent people of fraud, or people jumping to conclusion, or one person labels someone and all of a sudden it's documented and it follows them in other ways that's unjust, and they have that's obviously no bueno. So
Just one last observation on this is, of the companies that I talked to that actually were in the camp of the CISO's involved, they've got their dedicated resource that just really had this kind of like ideal state set up. The vast majority, it was a reactive situation because they had a breach. And so I think honestly, until this is a more known, not that it's not known, but a more prevalent thing where the pain can be felt to where they're preemptively to where it's proactive, that's when we'll see the training actually pick up. But right now, the training is only happening in large part with those that are on this reactive posture and they're scrambling to go, figure out how do they set up an organization that's actually capable of prevention.
What's interesting, Jake, too, is that the CTO of Google Cloud has interviewed almost every single CISO out there, and they have admitted to him specifically that they acknowledge that almost every single one of the Fortune 500s has hired at least one North Korean, if not a dozen or several dozen. So it's happening. And it's happening not just within the Fortune 500 community. The CISOs know it. I assume that their TA leaders also know it. So I think it's a problem that everyone's, and this is just the North Korean IT worker. I'm not even counting other types of fraud, little f, big F fraud, all that stuff. So it's out there. It's just a matter of finding the time, resources, and budget. I think there's a little bit of TA leaders feel a little bit of deer in the headlights, like, I don't know what to do with this. This is not something I'm trained on or know how to deal with, and I get it. They're kind of waiting for the CISOs to step up, and I think right now everyone's like pausing and waiting for somebody. I think it's just a matter of we all have to proactively step forward and say, okay, here, let's come up with a game plan. Let's decide ownership. Let's make a task force. Let's tackle this head on. So otherwise, it's just going to keep happening.
It is. Well, I had a couple of other questions prepped for us, but I am just looking at the time. I wonder if we want to open up for, I've seen some stuff coming through, just comments coming through the chat, but I just want to open it up and see if anybody wants to drop any questions specifically for us. Let me also scroll through and see what we had here. Oh, yeah, so I did see a question from Katie, and it was about background checks. I am a multitasking queen. First of all, hi, Katie. So Katie's question was, do we know or have data on how fraudulent applicants get caught in the background check process? What's the signal in the background check that we might be looking for there?
Fake documentation. And the problem is that it's so good and so easy now to get a legit fake ID, fake whatever, all the information that's captured through an I-9 and that whole onboarding process and background check process. You might know more details on this, Stacy, than I do, but that's really that's where it happens. And so it's the background check companies that are identifying it, but the tech that the bad actors have access to is far better than the detection capabilities of the background.
And going along with that also, it's not just the tech. Obviously, it's easy there's easy ways now to kind of fake the selfie and the fake ID, but out on the dark web, you can buy dozens of full-blown personas, profiles, identities, I should say, in mass for very cheap, and they come complete with social security number, date of birth, documentation, so people that's why all these fake candidates are coming up. It's very easy and cheap to buy it on the dark web now. I've been reading a lot of the cybersecurity reports on this. It's fascinating.
Yeah. I also see my friend Marvin Smith in here. Hey, Marvin, thanks for joining. Who shared, my big concern is how do we review candidates authenticity at scale when more and more people are applying for our jobs? And I think that this is actually a question that I was wanting us to get to as well, which was most of the solutions are putting an immense amount of scrutiny on candidates. And how do we balance, the attempts to verify the authenticity of a candidate at scale, while then also not inundating candidates with more hoops to, just wrecking the candidate experience? How do we do this?
I have some ideas, unless you want to go first, Jake.
No,
yeah.
The resume's dead. Right then.
I think we need to implement something called smart friction, and this is something that I believe wholeheartedly in, and I can go into more detail, but it's intentional, it's value add, it's asymmetric, and it's incremental. But let's focus on asymmetric. Great friction is invisible or seamless, practically invisible to good guys, but for the bad actors, it's very heavy lift, or they immediately, they'll just drop out of the process because it's, the ROI's not there, it takes too much time, or they out themselves. So I think smart friction is important. I think a lot of companies are turning to AI interviewers in order to handle some of the scale component of it, and I get it. I personally have some ideas of how we can scale it and still keep it human. I have never shared these publicly yet. I am waiting for the right moment to share it in Fraud Squad. Once we have enough members, I'm gonna
Okay, don't do it here. Don't do it here.
No, sorry, but I think as long as the more we can keep things human and still do what we need to do. That's the ideal state. But I get it that people are turning to AI interviewers and using technology. I get it.
Yeah, one of the things, this is loosely related, but one of my things on, the whole candidate experience, right? This is directionally related to this question, is I think it's in large part a candidate education issue. I don't think they can't, like, we're in the weeds of this, right? So we know what's happening, but candidates don't. They certainly don't know that it's at scale. And then you combine that with the fact that they're all desperate to just get in front of a human, or to get out of this rut of applying and to 100 jobs and getting no phone screens out of it. I think if you just communicate to them, this is what's happening. This is why I'm asking you to present your ID or something that might otherwise feel egregious and over ask. And I think they would actually embrace that friction, as Stacy was saying. And I think that's like, you can flip it on its head and it goes from a bad candidate experience to a great one, because they actually feel like they're getting an opportunity to showcase that they're a real person who's genuinely interested in this job.
This company cares about real people like me shining through. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think transparency is the best plan through all of this. It's a great deterrent. It's a great candidate experience. It's great for the interview team. It's great for the candidates. The more transparent we can be about all this, the less it's going to feel like, why are you putting me on the spot? Why do you suspect me?
Yeah. I actually have a survey going out imminently, and in it we're asking, are you conveying to candidates your expectations of how they use AI and how they shouldn't use AI? Because I'm not seeing a lot of just that simple information put out there, that expectation of, we do expect you are using it because we are. Here's how we recommend it, and here's how we don't. Like, that is, I think, so straightforward.
Every company should be putting that out. Every single company. If you don't have an AI transparency policy, you need to have that right now.
Yeah, right. Simple one. All right, so we're at time, but I have one other question from Carrie. It's actually, Carrie, very similar to our final closing question, which is the one thing that you would tell TA teams to do on Monday. Her question was like, what's that one initial change? But yeah, what's one thing that you would say for somebody to start doing on Monday? And Jake, we'll start with you for this one.
I think, getting the CISO involved and looping them in is the North Star, right? But I think for as far as like immediate action, my take would be to have one single owner, one clear path of escalation for every recruiter knows what they can do if there's something fishy, if they get the signal, if whatever, whether it's a team on their, or a member on their team who happens to be passionate about this, or whomever, but just creating a clear escalation path for when that signal fires.
Yeah. Stacy, what about you?
Great minds think alike. I was going to say that both components of your answer were both my same exact answer. I don't disagree at all.
Excellent. Well, cool. Well, Stacy, thank you for making time for us. I know you've got a busy week. She's a girl on the go, everyone. And Jake, thanks for putting together such a thoughtful piece of research. I really appreciate the hard work you put in here. So kudos to you both.
It's fun stuff.
Fantastic research.
All right. And if anybody wants to download the report, you can find it at kyleandco.com. And please, your recruiters, find Stacy on LinkedIn if you haven't already. She's doing some really, I think, important stuff. I've been getting questions about where we can find training and enablement and consulting, and she's your girl. So hit her up as well. Give her plenty of love. I will catch you guys on the next one. That's all we have time for today. Thank you for making time for us. We'll chat again with you soon. Bye, everybody.